Tazria-Metzora. Our parsha begins with childbirth. In the case of a male child, the Torah says, "On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised." This became known as milah, brit, the covenant of circumcision. That is, because even before Mount Sinai, ruling the dawn of Judaism, circumcision became the sign of God's covenant with Abraham. Why circumcision? Why from the outset? It is not just a mitzvah, one out of many, but the very sign of our covenant with God and His with us. Why was it on the 8th day? Last week's parsha was called Shmini, the 8th day. It's named that way because it dealt with the inauguration of the Mishkan, the sanctuary, and that happened to be on the 8th day. But is there a connection between these two different events? The place to begin is a strange midrash, recounting an encounter between Rabbi Akiva and the Roman governor Tyranus Rufus. Rufus began the conversation by asking whose works are better, those of God or of man? Surprisingly, Rabbi Akiva replied, those of men. Rufus responded, but look at the heaven and the earth. Can a human being make anything like this? Rabbi Akiva responded that this comparison was unfair. Creating the heaven and the earth is clearly beyond human capacity. Give me an example drawn from matters that are within human scope. Rufus then said, why do you practice circumcision? To this, Rabbi Akiva replied, I knew you would ask me this question. This is why I said in advance that the work of man are better than those of God. Rabbi Akiva then sent in front of the governor corn and cake. The unprocessed corn, the work of God, and the cake, the work of man. Is it not more pleasant to eat cake than eat raw ears of corn? Rufus then said, if God really wants us to practice circumcision, why did He not arrange for our babies to be born circumcised? Rabbi Akiva replied, God gave the commandments to Israel to refine their character. This is a very odd conversation, but as we will see, it's a deeply significant conversation. To understand this, we must go to the beginning of time. The Torah tells us that for 6 days, God created the universe. And on the 7th, He rested, declaring it holy. His last creation on the 6th day was humanity. The first man, the first woman, according to the sages, Adam and Eve, sinned by eating the forbidden fruit already on that day, and they were sentenced to exile from the Garden of Eden. However, God delayed the execution of the sentence for a day to allow them to spend Shabbat in the garden. As the day came to a close, the humans were about to be sent out to the world in the darkness of night. God took pity on them and showed them to make light. This is why we light a special candle on Havdalah. It's not just to mark the end of Shabbat, but it is also to show that we begin the work week with the light God taught us to make. The Havdalah candle represents the 8th day, which marks the beginning of human creativity. Just as God began the first day with the words, let there be light, so do we start the 8th day, our first day, creating the light God taught us to make. Human creativity is conceived parallel to divine creativity, and its symbol is the 8th day. What is striking here is that God does not remove the darkness. He doesn't promise a world without a night. Instead, He gives the human beings the capacity to respond. The Havdalah candle is therefore a symbol of transformation. It is a symbol of responsibility. As Shabbat ends, we move from the world that was given to us into the world that was entrusted to us. The flame we light is, in a sense, the first human partnership with God. Each week, as we hold that flame, we're reenacting that original moment, accepting once again the role of being partners in the work of creation, called to be a light into darkness, into a world who's not yet complete. Seen in this light, it stands in a sharp contrast to another ancient narrative about light. The Greek myth of Prometheus. In that story, fire belonged to the gods, and they guard it with jealousy. Prometheus steals it and gives it to humanity, defying Zeus, and is punished for it for eternity. Fire, in that vision, is something the divine does not wish to share. Human progress comes through rebellion. In the Torah's vision, there is no theft or defiance. God Himself teaches the human beings how to make fire. Human creativity is not a challenge to God, but God's divine plan. We are not rivals of heaven, we're partners of heaven. This is why the Mishkan was inaugurated on the 8th day. There's an unmistakable parallelism between the language the Torah uses to describe God's creation of the universe and the Israelites' creation of the sanctuary. The first was God's creation for us. The second is the 8th day where we create a creation for God. And this is why circumcision takes place in the 8th day. All life we believe comes from God. Every human being bears his likeness and image. We see each child as a gift from God. And yet, it takes a human act, circumcision, to signal that a male Jewish child has entered the covenant. To signify that the covenant is a human one, between gods and humans. Just as it was on the foot on Mount Sinai when Israel said, "All that the Lord said, we will do and we will obey." Mutuality and reciprocity marks the nature of this specific covenant with God. First was Abraham, then was Moses, and then was the Israelites. It is this that differentiates the covenant God made with humankind through Noah, which involved no human response. Its content was the 7 Noahide laws. Its sign was a rainbow. But God asked nothing of Noah, not even his consent. This is the unique concept of Judaism, of the duality of the universal and the particular. We're all in a covenant with God for the mere fact that we're human. We're bound, all of us, to the basic universal law of morality. That is part of what it means to be human. But to be Jewish is a particular covenant of reciprocity with God. God calls, we respond. God begins the work, but calls on us to complete it. That is what circumcision represents. God did not cause a male child to be born circumcised, said Rabbi Akiva, because he deliberately left this act, this sign of the covenant, to us. Now we understand the depth of the conversation between Rabbi Akiva and the Roman governor. For the Romans, the Greeks, and the world in general, the gods were found in nature. The suns, the seas, the sky, the earth and its seasons, the fields and its fertility. In Judaism, God is beyond nature, and this covenant takes us beyond nature also. So for us, not everything that's natural is good. War is natural, conflict is natural, violent competition is natural. Jews are inspired of the supernatural, by the God of Abraham. God values not his creation, but the works of humans. God left the work unfinished, so we can become his partners in completing it. By responding to God's commandments, we become refined. God delights in our creativity and helped us along the way by teaching the first humans how to make light. That made Judaism unique in its faith, God's faith in mankind. God created physical nature, the nature charted by science, but he asked us to be co-creators with him. As Rabbi Mordechai Alter said, when God said, "Let us make man in our image," to whom was he speaking? To man himself. God said to man, "Let us, you and I, make man together." The question is not just what God created, but what has he chosen not to complete? The space he leaves is a space of human responsibility. The covenant is the way we enter that space, not as passive beings, but as partners, called to take the world that is and help shape it to the world that is ought to be. Shabbat Shalom.